Good day, beautiful people. Welcome back to POV Politics, your go-to source for unfiltered political news coverage. You're hanging with your host, Shay. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe because it really helps to build this community. So today we're looking at protests across the world. And if you think only paying attention to politics in America was all you needed to know, well, you're wrong. Politics around the globe shapes our democracies, from Kenya to Italy, from Chicago to the Netherlands. Ordinary people are pouring into the streets. Some are rising against corruption and authoritarian overreach. Others, especially across Europe, are being driven by fear, anger, and hateful calls against migrants. What you're about to see is not isolated chaos. It's a clash of visions for the future. On one side, the demand for dignity, justice, and survival, and on the other, moments fueled by division and scapegoats. Either way, the people are speaking and the government needs to listen. So, let's talk about this. July of 2025, Kenya's streets erupted after a young man died in police custody. What began as grief quickly turned into a nationwide movement against corruption, brutality, and the soaring cost of living. For many Kenyans, this isn't just about one tragic case. It's about decades of broken promises and unaccountability at every level of the government. The youth are leading the charge, refusing to stay silent, and they're saying it loud and clear: the system must change and the people will no longer wait. In September 13, 2025, in London, more than 110,000 people gathered for an anti-immigrant rally led by the far-right figure Tommy Robinson. The demonstration quickly turned violent with clashes in the streets, a vivid sign of how nationalism and authoritarian ideas are gaining traction across the globe. But here is the other side. Massive counter-reactions across the UK show that many people refuse to accept fear-based politics. What we are seeing isn't just a rally, it's a fight over identity, values, and the very future of their country. July of 2025, in the Netherlands, protesters dressed in red forming a red line, marching for Gaza. They demanded sanctions on Israel and access for humanitarian aid. This wasn't just about foreign policy, it was about the Dutch citizens insisting that their government listen to moral demands over the military alliances. But that's when the protesting took a different turn. On one side, solidarity marching for Gaza, but more recently, the city has erupted with anti-immigrant hate. Throwing stones, cars were set ablaze, and dozens were arrested. And not just in the Netherlands, London, North Ireland, and Poland have all seen the same wave of far-right rallies, demanding walls and deportation. Europe is at a crossroad. Open borders versus fire flags and fear, and it seems like the shift is already here. In June of 2025, in Mali, protests erupt against the ruling junta after it pushed new constitutional changes and tried to ban political parties altogether. Citizens filled the streets to defend something far bigger than one law. They were fighting for the right to choose their leaders, to organize, and to have a voice in their own futures. Living under military rule, people know the risk of speaking out. But their message was clear. Democracy is not an option, it's a right. These demonstrations remind us of how fragile democracy can be, but also how necessary it is, and how ordinary people will keep fighting even if the cost is high. September of 2025, Donald Trump threatened to bring military forces into Chicago. The response was immediate. Protesters flooded the streets not only in Chicago, but also in Washington, D.C., sending a clear message that the military should never be used as a weapon against the American people. For many, this wasn't just about one city. It was about defending civil liberties, rejecting authoritarian overreach, and protecting the line between civilian life and military power. These protests became a test of democracy itself, raising the urgent question: should the U.S. military even be turned against its own people, or is that the moment when democracy gives way to dictatorship? In September of 2025, in Timor-Leste, and please forgive me for mispronouncing that word, I tried, students took to the street to push back against what they saw as overspending in the government, luxurious SUVs for members of parliament, and lifetime pensions for politicians. For a country that is still rebuilding from decades of conflict and poverty, these perks felt like a slap in the face to ordinary citizens still struggling with jobs, education, and housing. The youth argued that leaders should be serving the people and not enriching themselves. Their movement was loud, organized, and impossible to ignore. And it worked. The government backed down, marking a rare victory where the power of the youth forced real accountability and proved that democracy is still alive when people demand it. In September of 2025, Italy saw nationwide strikes and demonstration in solidarity with Gaza. Workers walked off their jobs, unions raised their voices, and students filled the street, all demanding recognition of the Palestine and an end to the war. For many Italians, it wasn't just about foreign policy. It was about calling out governments seen as complicit in violence abroad while ignoring struggles at home. These actions show how global conflicts don't just play out overseas, they echo in domestic politics and fuel solidarity movements that tie bread and butter issues like wages, education, and justice to the larger fight for peace. Italy's message was unmistakable. Peace is not abstract. It's a worker issue, it's a community issue, and a demand that links everyday lives to global justice. August of 2025, in Indonesia, citizens poured into the street to protest what they call government elitism, massive housing perks for members of parliament, while ordinary families struggle with rising costs. For many, the demonstration wasn't just about money. It represented a deeper frustration with leaders who appeared disconnected from reality of working people, from food prices to jobs to the basic services. The protests made one thing clear: privilege cannot come before the people. The call was for fairness, accountability, and the government that puts daily survival and dignity at the center of its priorities. In August of 2025, in Brazil, massive crowds filled the streets to oppose a proposed amnesty for former President Bolsonaro. But the bill wasn't just about him. It would have shielded politicians across the spectrum from prosecution, effectively rewriting the rules of accountability. For millions of Brazilians, this was a direct attack on justice and democracy itself. Their message was loud and clear: corruption cannot be excused, power cannot place anybody above the law, and democracy only works if consequences apply equally to all. By marching in such huge numbers, ordinary people forced the country to confront a fundamental truth: there can be no democracy without accountability. So my POV is pretty simple. These protests, whether they're in Mali, London, or Chicago, carry a common theme. The lower classes are tired. The working people are standing up against the government, elites, and systems that exploit them. But we also have to be clear. Not every uprising is about liberation. In Europe, we're seeing how frustration is being twisted into anti-immigrant, and that's not justice. That's hate repackaging as politics. If you see people in your community organizing, please pay attention. Support the movements that fight for dignity and justice, and call out those that build on division and fear. That's what democracy demands. Because when the most vulnerable fight back, whether that's workers, immigrants, or just poor people, the world shifts. So remember, facts over fear, love instead of hate, and always get your facts straight. Talk to you soon.